Hello, tiny friends. Welcome back to Tiny Keyhole Minis. I'm Jolene, and today I'm going to be doing a miniature challenge. I'm trying to create and incorporate some of the ideas that are popping up in the comments, and here's one that I fell in love with. Today's idea is coming from our tiny friend, One Fine Piece of Glass, who suggests that maybe I add Cal's old teddy bear or tricycle up in the attic, and I absolutely love the tricycle idea. Now I do have a teddy bear, and I will come up with a box of Cal's old childhood toys, but today I'm going to create that tricycle. And since Cal was born in the late 1800s, it's going to be an 1800s tricycle. Now this is not a tutorial, not a tutorial. I'm just going to say that right now. And this video may be a little out of sorts. This is just how I created the tricycle. I picked out an image of one that I liked, and I'm going to be following the photo reference. The first thing I did was I hammered down some aluminum wire. Now, I don't have the proper tools to hammer down wire, so I just used what I had. So these look pretty banged up, but it's not going to matter in the end because the tricycle is supposed to look old anyways. These will be the tricycle wheels, and I just used a bottle of paint to kind of round them off. Now, the tricycle in the photo has wooden wheels. These ones are going to be metal, but I need to make the back wheels a little smaller. So I'm just going to just shape it down just a little bit more, get them nice and even, and clip off the excess wire. I'm just using my needle nose pliers to kind of flatten down the two connecting points. I'm not going to glue them together because they won't stay glued together. So I'm trying to get them closed as best as I can so you can't really notice that. So they look pretty good, and I think I'm good to go. I'm going to use this dark piece of wire for my back axle rod. This will hold the two smaller wheels, the back wheels. I'm just using some scrap clay to create the little bolts that will hold the spokes and be attached to the wheels. This was the best idea that I can come up with so that I can actually poke little holes around the outer sides of these little wheels, and then the wires will sit inside and I can glue them into place. So I'm just using a tiny little circle cutter and popping them out. These are not going to be perfect, but they really don't need to be. They won't really be noticeable. So I'm just popping out two for each wheel. I'm going to take the axle rod and just poke holes in the centers of all of these because they will be attached to the rod in the back and in the front. And then I'm taking these little wooden spindles and I'll be using those to actually be the centerpiece for the wheel. So each spindle will have two of these little pieces on each end, and it kind of look like this. And then the spokes will go around the clay pieces, and then this will be inside the wheel. Before I can bake the clay pieces, I'm going to poke the holes that will actually hold the spokes. And I'm going to use this thin wire for the spokes. So I'm just taking a piece and I'm going to poke the holes all around the outer side of these little clay discs. Now the back wheels each have 10 spokes. Each wheel will have 2 of these discs. So that means there needs to be 5 spokes in each disc. The front wheel, I counted 12 spokes, so there'll be 6 spokes in each disc. And I'm just eyeballing this. I'm not measuring the distance of each hole. It's not really going to matter. I'm actually just eyeballing this whole project. So this will not be perfect at all. So once I get all my holes poked into place, I'll go ahead and bake the clay pieces. For the back wheels, the axle rod needs to kind of be centered in the middle of each wheel. And I'm going to go ahead and put this piece together and come back and show you how I did that with the front wheel. Beginning with a little wooden spindle, I'm just making sure that the ends are nice and flat, so I'm sanding them down. And now I'm going to add some super glue and glue on the little clay wheels. These little spindles were cut from a bigger spindle. I've attached little rods to the outside of each clay piece, and that's actually going to hold the pedals and also the bar that's going to be attached to the handlebars. I'm going to start gluing my spokes right inside the little holes that I made. And I'm going to do both sides before I actually attach the wheel. So I'm just adding a little bit of super glue and then popping these spokes right into place. I'll cut them down when I'm fitting on the wheel. Okay, so this is what it looks like. And before I can try to put the wheel on or cut these pieces down, I need to let this dry completely. So I'm going to set it aside and move on to some more pieces. Moving on to create all of the parts to this tricycle. I need to create a little bracket that's actually going to be attached to the bars that are in the front of the tricycle, to the midsection that holds the seat, and it kind of puts those two pieces together. This piece will allow the front end of the tricycle, where the front wheel is, to move back and forth side to side. I'm just using a piece of tin pie pan, and I've cut a skinny strip. I'm using a flathead pin, added some holes in the ends. I'm going to bend this into shape of kind of like a square shaped U. And I'm going to create two of these pieces. One will actually be a slightly smaller and sit inside the other. And then the pin will go through both of them and attach them together. One side will be glued to the front bars, the other side will be glued to the midsection right by the seat. So this piece will be the bar that holds the seat, and one side will be glued to this. The pin will actually go through this piece as well. So I'm going to drill a little hole in the end so that the pin can go through all of these pieces. And this is just aluminum wire that I've hammered down and flattened and then shaped. So it's going to look something like this. And then there'll be two other bars that will go along the bottom here. Okay, I'm going to move on to the handlebars, which turned out to be one of my favorite parts. I'm using the same wire that I chose for the axle rod, and I'm just going to shape the handlebars according to the photo. I'm moving on to the handles, and I've already created one, so I'll show you how I did that. The handles in the photo are wooden, and I'm using a wooden barbecue skewer. I'm drilling a hole in the end, and once I get this hole drilled out, that's where the wire of the handlebar will actually fit inside and I can glue it into place. I'm going to be using 3 different needle files to create the shape of these. And the first one is a 3-sided needle file. It's got like 3 sharp edges, almost kind of like a triangle. I'm just creating a groove all the way around close to the end, and it'll leave the end piece looking kind of like a seed bead. For the next 2 files, one is going to be the round file and the other one is going to be the half round. So the edges on both sides are slightly bulged out a bit. And I'm just going in to kind of taper down this section. So I'm going to go back and forth using both of these files until I get the shape that I like. And then I'm going to cut down the piece that I want. After cutting the piece down, I'm just going to use a nail file to round off the edge. So I'm kind of shaping this to look like a little baseball bat. Okay, moving on to create the seat, which is also my favorite part. So the handlebars and the seat turned out to be my favorite parts from this tricycle. I'm using a chipboard that came from the back of a drawing pad. So it's a pretty thick and stiff piece of chipboard. And I just sketched out a shape that looks like the seat. And now I'm just cutting it out. To cushion the seat, I'm going to use a piece of packing foam and some fabric tack to stick these pieces together. Once this piece is nice and secure, I'm going to go ahead and trim all the excess foam off. Okay, so I've got my piece out and I'm going to actually use a piece of scrap leather. I'm using real leather to cover the seat. Before I glue that on, I'm going to use a rough nail file just to wear down the leather a little bit and make it look a little older. I'm going to use fabric tack for this piece as well and just stick it onto the seat. I'm going to go ahead and round off around the edges and then just cut some snips all the way around to pull the fabric nice and tight and glue it to the bottom. Okay, this is what it looks like so far. I'm almost done. I just need to create the bottom board. But it's so gosh darn cute. Oh my goodness. This is so much fun, tiny friends. Okay, so to create the bottom board, I've just traced it out on a piece of chipboard, the same chipboard I used earlier, and now I'm just going to cut it out. I'm adding some wood glue all around the edges to round it off. I'll let that dry and come back to it. Coming back to the front wheel, I'm placing the wheel in the center, or at least trying to place it in the center. It doesn't really work out that way, but it still works out. And now I can go ahead and push the spokes into place. I'm just going to do a few at a time, glue them into place, and then set it aside and come back to it. The wheels were the most difficult part of this project. It was quite a challenge to get these to work out. And in the end, this one still definitely needs a lot of work. But it worked out enough for this project. I'm not 100% with this wheel, and you'll see why in the end. So I'm just adding a little bit of glue and pushing it into place so that it touches the metal wheel. And I'm just making sure that it's in the center. And I'll just come back to it a few more times to repeat the process. Okay, I'm going to paint the handles before adding them to the handlebar. So I'm using Antique Wax by Waverly. While those are drying, I'm going to continue to work on the handlebars. The handlebars have some sort of round metal piece in the middle of them, and then that attaches to the bars that will attach to the wheel. So for that piece, I'm using a skinny strip from a tin pie pan, and I'm just rolling it around until I get the thickness that I like, and then I'll snip off any excess and glue it in place. I'm just going to use my nail file to sand the handlebars just to remove some of the excess antique wax and make them look a little worn down. On the original Tricycle, I can tell that there's some sort of varnish on the handles. So once I'm done sanding them, I'm going to give them a nice coat of satin varnish by Duraclear. For the seat board that will be sitting underneath the seat, I'm going to paint that with black Mod Podge. So it's a little bit of black acrylic paint mixed with matte Mod Podge. And I'm going to let that sit aside. And I'm going back and forth while these pieces are drying. So for the handlebars, I'm going to attach this tiny little eyelet or grommet right to the bottom of the round piece. And then I can insert the bars into the hole, and those bars will attach to the wheel later on. Okay, I'm going back to the wheel to put a few more of the spokes into place. Some of them need to be cut down to size. Some of them popped off completely, and I need to put them back into place. This is why I'm doing the spokes a few at a time, because it needs time to set and dry securely it's just a work in progress. But I'm going to jump ahead to all the finished parts and I'll show you what this wheel looks like completed. Okay, the front wheel is completed. I added the pedals and you're going to see the issue with this wheel. One side of the spokes protrude way further out than the other side. And I think the piece in the middle is too long. I couldn't get the wheel in the center. So that's why one side pokes out more. So that's the problem with this. But I'm going to continue on and use it as is because you won't really notice it when I set it into a scene. But all my parts are completed. So now I'm going to begin painting them with a base coat of black chalk paint. And I'm not going to paint everything, but I am going to begin to paint some of this metal. Once that is dry, I'm going to go in behind it with some Testors modeling paint, and I'm going to use this steel color. And then for the wheels, I'm going to give those a coat of metallic antique copper. Okay, tiny friends, all my parts are completed and painted, and for the most part, I'm satisfied with the parts, but I still have to put this thing together. I will go back in later on and sand down some of this paint so it looks a little worn down. Right now, it's just really vibrant, and some spots are a little thicker, so I'll do that process after I put it together. I should probably do it now, but I don't do that. I'm going to assemble it and it's going to be super fragile when I am done. And I'm going to sand it down after I assemble it. And then I'm going to have to reassemble it. So here I go. Okay, tiny friends, here it is, but I still have to sand down some of the paint. But this completes today's project, and I hope you have enjoyed it. It is super fragile, so I won't touch it too much. Here's a comparison of the photo I was referencing versus the mini. I am happy with the results, but it could use a little work. For the time being, I will place it in the attic, and it looks like Orlan is super happy with that decision. But once I build the barn, I'll move it down to the barn so that it could be outside. I want to thank you, One Fine Piece of Glass, for this idea. And as usual, I want to thank everybody for watching, subscribing, and welcome to all my new subscribers. Please don't forget to let me know what you think in the comments below and click that like button and give it a thumbs up. Until next time, tiny friends, I hope you all have a lovely day, and I will see you all on the mini side.